Hello Grandmasters, Mike from the WCA. I want to show you guys a game played by Mahiro Abe, who was a student of Rusa's for many years. He was one of the original WCA students way back for when we had our place in Rye. He recently made Master a couple of months ago. This video is being recorded in June of 2014, and Mahiro came in and gave a lecture to our 4 o'clock class and talked about what it took to play at this level. We were really impressed. He's a terrific kid, very mild-mannered, very respectful, but underneath, when he's playing chess, he plays like a firecracker. The kid's really amazing. So we're going to show you a sample of his work here from the Philadelphia Open in 2014, where he was playing a very experienced international master named Thomas Bartel. Mahiro has white. So let's take a look at the game, and keeping in mind a couple of the themes that we've talked about this year, especially for the 4 o'clock class. And namely, we're trying to get these players to really understand what side of the board they're supposed to be playing on, especially when you get into sharp positions when kings are castled on both sides of the board. Okay, so let's take a look at the opening, and then we will we'll talk more about those themes as they pop up. Okay, so the game begins as a Caro-Kann, and we'll just go through the main moves here, and the players are walking into the mainline Caro-Kann, which is bishop f5. Knight goes to g3, chases the bishop back to g6, and then Mahiro chooses kind of a sideline here in the Caro-Kann. He plays knight h3, and this is a pretty cool move. It's designed, hopefully you can see the mouse cursor spinning around here. It's designed to, a couple of reasons. One, it'll jump to f4 at some point and trade itself for this bishop here on g6, and normally in the mainline Caro-Kann it's white that trades the bishop here against this guy, but Mahiro's idea is to give up a knight for that bishop, giving him the bishop pair, and also with the idea of castling long for his opponent while he goes short, so he'll create a really dynamic position. So let's get through the opening and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So black plays e6, and Mahiro plays knight f4 as planned. He's going to chase down that bishop on g6. So bishop to d6, and then rather than taking the bishop right away, he plays this kind of in-between move. He puts the knight on h5, which threatens the pawn up here on g7 rather. So he kind of forces black to give up the bishop here, and then when the knight takes back, he's hitting that pawn again. And it's really not an easy pawn to defend. If you bring your king to f8, that could be a bit of a problem. I mean, it might not be terrible, but your king not being able to castle is not to everyone's taste. You probably don't want to bring your bishop back to f8, so the most logical move is the one that black played, is he plays the move g6. And it's not really that dangerous to weaken all those dark squares up there, because black, number one, is going to castle the other way, and number two, he still has his dark squared bishop. So Mahiro puts the knight back on f4. You may have picked up the possibility of jumping the knight in with check, but after king f8, the knight is trapped. You could take a pawn for it here and take back on e6 and then maybe put some more pressure here, but I don't think white is going to get enough of their piece, so that's not something that everyone is going to go for. So Mahiro just puts the knight back on f4, and you'll see with the highlights that there are a whole complex of dark squares that have been weakened, but as I mentioned, it's really not that big a deal right now. So black continues to develop with knight d7, and then Mahiro kind of shows his hand here. He plays g3, and this is a thematic move. If you look at some of the masters who have played this way as white, he's following in their footsteps. He's going to fianchetto his light square bishop, and then queen c7 for black. And that kind of sends a signal as to what black is intending. So he's most likely going to take this king here and go long on the queen side, and Mahiro, after bishop g2, is telling black, well, look, you can go long, but I'm going to go short, and we're going to get this really tense game. So before castling, he plays the move c3. And a lot of players, when they have a pawn in the middle, and you'll see here that it's on the 4th rank, and every one of black's pawns have reached no further than the 3rd rank. So Mahiro has more space. So one concept at the master level before attacking is to kind of secure your space. Castling would have been fine, but he plays the move c3, which does a couple of things. One, as I mentioned, it secures his most advanced pawn, and it also opens the diagonal here for the queen, and you'll see later that that turns out to be a key attacking idea for white. So black plays the move knight e7, developing his last minor piece, and he could have made a break in the center at this point. And this would have been interesting. He could have played e5. Now, you have to remember, black is an international master, and they're very cautious sometimes about these pawn breaks. Even though Mihiro's king is in the center of the board, the reason you have to be cautious with these breaks as black is if Mihiro decides to trade like this, now he'll castle, and let's say you bring your piece out to f6 for black. The thing that black needs to be careful about, and let me put up a couple of highlights, is Mihiro's got these two pointy guys, these two bishops, and chess players are just so cautious when the two central files are without pawns. And as we've mentioned in countless videos, be aware of the number of center pawns in any chess position, especially when there are bishops roaming around, because they really eat up those positions. They just love it when the board's open. So I have a feeling Thomas was not crazy about opening the game for Mihiro's bishops. So instead he just brought his bishop to, his knight rather, to e7, and Mihiro plays castling. Now it's funny, I almost called him Hikaru, after Hikaru Nakamura, who's someone else who kind of grew up in the area that we all did. He happens to be like 2840 USCF or something ridiculous like that. I think even higher. Yeah, that would have been a nice comparison, right? So anyway, after Mihiro castles, the stage is set for a classic opposite side castling battle. And, you know, what do you think black plays? Black's move is almost screaming at you right here, and it's the move h5. And in the notes to the game, Mihiro told us that after h5, a really sharp position has come up on the board, and he felt that the white king was going to end up being a little bit safer than black's, and it turns out he was right. But I give him a lot of credit for purposely going after a position like this, because he kind of knew he was going to get attacked. Now let me show you the move he played. He plays the move b4 here, and before we take a look at what happened after that, let me first show you a very common mistake that players make in positions like this. They'll play a move like h4, which does stop the h-pawn for black from moving further up the board, but you guys have to remember, opposite side castling positions, you very, very rarely want to move pawns in the area you're being attacked unless it's absolutely necessary, because when you create this little pawn wedge here, it's extremely easy here for black to just push g5 and open up a line. You could take the pawn, but now the h-pawn is free to go again, and now before you know it, black is going to open the h-file quickly, and you've made a couple of weaknesses around your king. So that's why in this position, after black plays h5, Mihiro just ignores it and follows through with the move b4. So he's going to start a pawn storm on the queen side, and black just keeps coming on the king side. Now a cool move again by white. He's really up for a challenge, Mihiro, and he plays the move c4. And c4 abandons the protection of the b pawn that I'm circling. And he wrote in his notes that a computer might take the pawn because the computer can calculate the immediate threats and say, hey, you know, I can grab the pawn and I don't see white doing anything terrible. Let me grab it. But humans have a very different outlook. And Mihiro actually mentioned it in his notes. So, you know, if you grab the pawn, then he's going to play a move like bishop, rook to b1. And depending on what you do with your pieces, for example, if the bishop runs to a5, then maybe a move like knight d3, and I'm highlighting the future of the dark squared bishop, which is going to put an awful lot of pressure on this diagonal, and that could even get the queen caught up in there, or the black king, so that might not be pleasant. And then the other retreat after rook b1 might be bishop to d6, And, you know, after bishop d6, you're giving white that open b file to work with. So there's definitely compensation if he snatches the pawn. So after c4, I like the way black played as well. They're kind of playing a game of chicken. It's like, I'm not going to give in to you and play on your side of the board. I'm going to keep doing what I'm going to do, and we're going to see who gets there first. Classic example of opposite side castling. So g5, hitting the knight, and Mihiro drops it back to e2, and now knight f5. So you'll notice that both players are pushing their pawns and trying to swing their pieces in the direction to attack. So the knight on f5 is now in the zone here of the white king. Black has the dark squared battery pointing in the direction, and hopefully someday they're going to open up the h-file and get the rooks in the action as well. So black is playing thematically, and check out Mihiro. Now he plays queen a4. So his bishop is already pointing in the right direction, the queen putting pressure on the a-file. The three pawns are threatening multiple breaks and pushes. So he's really keeping black guessing as well. This is just a terrific game. Something else I was very impressed with here, you'll notice that Mihiro did not develop the bishop yet on c1. And I don't know, how players who were beginners at one point learn this stuff over the years, but we've mentioned in videos before that bishops are basically developed as soon as you let it out. So here, as soon as you move this d pawn or this b pawn, the bishop has access to a whole bunch of squares. So technically, it's already developed because it can move, but when the kings are castled on opposite sides of the board, you cannot waste tempos. You just can't. They're too valuable. So just moving the bishop somewhere without having a clear purpose, I mean, it would connect the rooks, but in Russian they use the word shablon, and Rusa uses it all the time. And basically a shablon move means it's a move that looks really good, but it doesn't really serve a purpose. You'll connect your rooks, but Mihiro decides, let me bring the queen over and start threatening things, and I'll see where this bishop belongs a little bit later. Instead, he could have picked off the pawn on g5, right? I think you guys saw that. But again, you're kind of breaking the rules of opposite side castling. You're engaging black, or you're kind of pulling black into a fight where black is really ready for one. White is not ready for a fight on the king's side because he's swinging his pieces to the opposite side. So if you grab that pawn up there, yeah, sure, you're attacking this rook, but that same rook is going to just hop over to g8, attack you back, and you'll see with the highlights that black's going to put an enormous amount of pressure on white. Now, every black piece is getting ready to attack. So there's no way Mihiro was grabbing that pawn. So he plays queen a4. And then black, to his credit, still continues with that same game and says, well, here we go. I'm going to open up the h-file. And the proper way to take most of the time, guys, and I know this seems a little antipositional, is to take back with the h-pawn toward the center. And it really, really is scary. I know it's scary, opening up this file. But let me highlight your light squared bishop. Whenever you have a fianchettoed structure like this and you get to keep this bishop in the middle of those pawns, that bishop controls the h1 square, meaning that in order for there to be a check from a rook, it has to come on this square. The bishop controls h1, so you would have to triple up before you can do any damage here. Now, you could, of course, put a piece here, but it's not going to be check unless it's the queen. And you will see in this position, the queen is a long way away from getting to this file. So that's why he took this way. He keeps all the pawns like in this structure to keep him sheltered, and he's gambling or risking that he's going to punch through first on this side before black can organize enough attack on this line. So I hope that's clear for you guys. If it's not, just go back or pause the video and go over again the idea that after this trade, that this light squared bishop does a wonderful job of protecting the king. Okay, black, interestingly enough, here he played the move knight b6. and he attacks the queen, he attacks the c-pawn, so he's going to gain a tempo up there. But I want to show you something that could have happened in the game, and Mihiro did not mention it in the notes. If black thought he was worse here, he may have gone in for this surprising move, bishop takes g3. It's a sacrifice, and just to share with you, let me just show you what happens if everything comes off the board. Pawn takes bishop, if knight takes, queen takes. Black has essentially stripped the white king of all of his protection, and you can play around with this a little bit. You know, you could attack the queen, and she can jump down here and check you. Maybe, you know, if you come back, she goes back. And white has to be very careful here not to allow moves like rook h2 with mating threats, etc. So this may have been an interesting try for black. It may have only led to a draw, or drawing chances, and I think as an international master, I think he wanted to beat Mihiro. He wasn't interested in going for something like this. But I just figured I would point it out to you guys. Okay, so let's see what he actually did. He plays knight b6, hitting the queen, and Mihiro grabs the pawn up on a7, and they go for this trade. He takes the a pawn, allowing black to take his c pawn. But by doing that, it gives white a chance to play this nice move, b5. And after b5, the pawn has multiple threats. You have to be careful in the future it doesn't jump into b6, and that would create a pawn wedge on the 6th rank. We know about those from previous videos. You also have an opportunity to take here, just opening more squares around the king. So black didn't like that idea and takes the pawn. But that's kind of double-edged, right? Because by taking the pawn, he's not only weakening it, it is now part of a double isolated setup here. Number one, and number two, you'll see our bishop is kind of shining this flashlight. The c file has now completely opened up, and with a queen and a king on that file, that could be a real problem. So as soon as it opens up, Mihiro jumps on the weakness, and black plays a move that probably cost him the game, although his idea is really very good. It's just very hard to see this stuff with a clock ticking over the board. He plays the move f6, and f6 is designed with really one clear purpose, and that's this. You'll see that by playing f6, it gives the black queen an opportunity to slide over, join the rook, and queen here on h2 would actually be checkmate, right? So f6 is really, really powerful. But I think he underestimated white's chances, and Mihiro, just an awesome demonstration of how to keep the initiative. He plays rook takes b5. And in this position, black bailed out and played the move b6, offering a queen trade. So let me show you what would have happened if he had gone for the mating idea, queen h7. And here, by the way, I would recommend, if you have the time, to set this position up on your board, and you can just play around with the different attacks that white has here. There's more than one variation, and I don't want to go too long because of the video. But in your case, if you had the time, you can set this up and have some fun with this. But let's just take a look at one line. Queen a8 check. If the king tries to make a run for it, we have the move rook takes b7, and you notice that's a skewer. You're going to hit the queen if the king moves, so the natural thing to do is to block with the bishop. But then the surprising exchange sacrifice, rook takes bishop, and black is getting crushed. If you don't want to lose the queen, you've got to take back with the king, but now you'll see the long-range potential of your light square bishop and soon your dark square bishop. Queen c6 check, king b8, and now this really cool move, bishop f4. And this is really a clearance sacrifice, because when you play bishop f4, you clear the back rank, you clear the square, and that's a clear line up to the black king. That's going to spell trouble for black. So whether or not he takes the bishop or just moves the king like this, it doesn't matter. There's a forced mate here. So again, you can pause your video and play around with this. But queen a4 check. And just check out those bishops, guys. Isn't that amazing? Just incredible how well those pieces do when the board's opened up. So after queen a4, king b6, we just swing our rook over to b1, and it's curtains now. Knight b2, take the knight, good night, checkmate. Anyway, back to the game. So after the move b6, Mihiro says no thank you to the queen trade. He's not interested in trading queens. He wants the black king. So he's going to leave his queen on the board to see how much damage she can cause. And then a defensive idea, black plays bishop e7, and the purpose of the move was to get this knight, or one of these knights, into this square on d6 to chase away the rook and to cover up the king, but it's not going to work. How to continue these attacks is one of the most difficult things to do, but the way Mihiro handled this is very instructive. Finally, after 24 moves, he decides to develop his dark square bishop, and he plays the move bishop e3, which is a very crafty move. It not only opens this back rank for the rook, but it also gives black a chance to make a blunder. For example, if you take that bishop, he'll take back here, and you have a problem. You have to keep a rook off of this line, because if you don't, the rook is going to come here. This knight is pinned, and there's all sorts of trouble here. And if you played a move like bishop a3 to control this square, then something like rook f6, just grabbing a pawn there, is going to be a problem for black. You'll notice there's a big difference now taking a pawn here after black is completely disorganized. The reason is you can get away with this is black has to constantly keep pieces up in this area to stop from being mated. So anytime he tries to organize an attack here, white is just going to come in first, and there would be a big problem. So after this move bishop e3, there was no way that black was taking that piece. So as planned, he drops his knight into d6, and interestingly enough, after bringing his last piece into the game with rook c1, black resigned. Black is an IM. That stands for International Masters. So he's a title player, and he knows a lot about chess. So as a little bit of an exercise, I'd like you guys to, stop the video and kind of figure out why the game was over here. Mihiro thought it was a little premature that he resigned, but one idea was he was going to bring this bishop to d2 and into b4 and just constantly increase the pressure on all these pieces. But when you do the math, I mean, take a look at this light squared bishop cutting in through here. Look at this pin here. The activity of all the white pieces over the board, I can assure you it's not pleasant playing against a kid like Mihiro. So I hope you enjoyed the game. I absolutely loved it. I think he played a great game. He's a great kid, and we're so happy and lucky to have him come to the WCA and share his experience with you guys. All right, I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you soon.